Well, whether you're ready for it or not, it's that time of year again. The season when every trip to the grocery store begins with the walk past all the freshly cut Christmas trees lining their sidewalks, their piney scent enveloping you just before you enter the store. And isn't there something special about that smell that just puts you in the Christmas spirit? From there, though, comes the seasonally awkward part of any shopping trip, as your pace slightly quickens in an attempt to pass by the Salvation Army ringer without making any eye contact. Ah, crap, he saw me. Sorry, dude, I don't have any change. Once inside the safety of the store, though, things begin to feel a bit more magical again. Gingerbread house kits, baking supplies, and seasonal spices are set up on every end cap. Eggnog is in the dairy cooler, and the obligatory 2 aisles of seasonal goods that every supermarket's required to have are filled with ornaments, wreaths, tinsel, and lights. And somewhere in their midst are those novelty, massively sized Hershey Kisses that my mom used to get me every year as a kid growing up. And if this is a grocery store that's really excited about Christmas, I mean really excited, then they've no doubt found a way to hoist one of those giant, inflatable Frosty the Snowman onto the top of the frozen section. And it feels good. It feels special to see all the seasonal displays and buy the products that are only available during this time of year. But still, it's a grocery store, so you don't hang around any longer than you have to. And what comes next, at least for me, always proves to be one of the most interesting and uncomfortable parts of any shopping trip around this time of year. I approach the checkout stand and start placing my groceries on the conveyor belt. I greet the cashier with a bit larger smile than I normally would. He starts scanning the groceries, bagging them as he goes. Once my cart's filled back up with everything I'm buying, I hand over the money and he returns my change. As I begin to push my cart away, I say, Happy you know what? You have a good day. I'll see you later. Well, after that, whatever that was, I pushed my cart out through the parking lot and back towards my car. Again, passing by all the Christmas trees, this time slightly embarrassed and a little bit confused, thinking to myself, I never know what to say to strangers this time of year. I wish I could just share my joy with people and not have to worry about the specific words I use. Man, I love Christmas. I wish I could just share that excitement with others. Welcome to the Grounded Presence Podcast, a place for exploring authentic identity, deep community, and the process of spiritual evolution. I'm Daniel Powell, and today I'm going to explore how authentic identity and our holiday greetings intersect. I think we can use our holiday greetings to foster a deeper sense of community, even with people we hardly know or a random stranger on the street, rather than just using them as little pleasantries in our small talk. Well, that's it for the intro. Let's get back into the episode. Well, the temperatures have dropped, the sunny skies have given way to cloudier, chillier days, the leaves have all fallen off of the trees, and you've probably even seen your first snow by now. Well, depending on where you live anyways. There are probably a few straggling Thanksgiving leftovers left in the freezer, ones that, let's be honest, probably won't get eaten at this point. But at any rate, we find ourselves smack dab in the middle of the holiday season. And that's what it is, isn't it? The holiday season? It's a lot of holidays shoved into a short period of time. You got Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Day, New Year's Eve, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, and I gotta be honest with you, I've heard a lot about Kwanzaa, but I don't think I've ever met anybody that actually practices it. Or at least if I have, I've been completely unaware of it. So needless to say, I have no idea what goes on at a Kwanzaa celebration or any of the traditions behind that. But on the other hand, I've met plenty of Jewish people who celebrate Hanukkah. But again, I have to admit, I'm really unaware and ignorant of the traditions of Hanukkah and what takes place during the holiday and how it's celebrated. While I do know the basics, I know that lighting menorah is involved in the festivities somehow, and the only other thing I know is something about a dreidel. But that's really it. I really only know the stereotypical stuff. So I say all this just to acknowledge that these two holidays are things I really know nothing about. And their celebrations are places that I've never been invited into or even experienced. So I may say that it's the holiday season, but to me on a personal level, it's the Christmas season. And in recent years past, there's been great debate over what this holiday season should be called and the proper way to greet strangers during the latter half of December. I think this debate's been made more tangible and present since the social media uproar over the Starbucks cups in 2015. But for me, I grew up in an evangelical Christian church, so I always heard the message to keep Christ in Christmas and that Jesus is the reason for the season. I even remember an old man standing up in front of our congregation and reading a poem he had written on the topic of how would you like it if somebody replaced your name with X? Of course, referring to the substitution of Xmas for Christmas. Though he didn't have a combative tone or anything, it was good-natured, but deep down you could tell he was concerned about what he judged to be the secularization of Christmas. And if you grew up in a similar environment, I'm sure you know that sort of talk and rhetoric very well. But back to the central question that I'm struggling with in this episode. What do we say to each other in this season? I mean, I know I don't want to offend anybody, and I want to be really respectful of everybody and the way they celebrate. So with this in mind, I did a little bit of research, and I found some really interesting statistics from the Pew Research Center. And this is a study from 2017, so it's very recent. 90% of Americans say that they celebrate Christmas. And 46% of Americans celebrate it as a primarily religious holiday. So that means if 46% celebrate it as primarily religious and 10% don't celebrate it at all, then I think I did this calculation right. But 44% of those that celebrate don't celebrate it as a primarily religious holiday. So about half and half. It's divided right down the middle if it's a primarily religious holiday or not. There's some other interesting statistics in that article. I'll put a link in the show notes. I highly recommend reading it, so check that out. But in light of these statistics, it looks like there is a relatively low probability that I'd say Merry Christmas to somebody who doesn't celebrate the holiday. And furthermore, I'd assume that a relatively low proportion of those 10% that don't celebrate the holiday at all would even be offended by a cheerful, heartfelt greeting. In contrast to my evangelical Christian upbringing, I'm not really concerned with how individuals choose to celebrate the holiday. It's okay with me if some celebrate it in a religious context and others don't celebrate it in any religious context. The only thing I'm interested in is how do we communicate our joy and happiness with one another? And are we being authentic and vulnerable in our communications? Authentic communication is tricky though. It's very nuanced, and it's going to look different for each of us. But for me, saying happy holidays just doesn't feel authentic in my at my core. Merry Christmas feels like what's most natural for me to say. And this is because I grew up celebrating Christmas. And I'm sure at least in part, it's also because I grew up receiving the messages of keep Christ in Christmas. So even though I don't feel the need to hold Christmas tightly, I still like to celebrate the holiday. So why it feels natural for me is no doubt complex, but what aspect of the human experience isn't? And I think more than anything, we just need to strive to be honest and authentic about ourselves and our experience. And that's what I'm going to try to do this Christmas season, is just be more honest and authentic about my experience of it. And also leave room for others to be authentic with their experience of the season and celebrations as well. The argument's often made that we should all just say happy holidays to one another just to make sure that everyone is included in our greeting and to make sure that nobody feels offended by the way we greet them. And I just want to say this is such a noble desire to make sure that nobody gets hurt. That's fantastic. And we don't do a good job as a society of being loving in that way. But I think too often, in the name of inclusivity, a lot of times we forget to include ourselves and our own experiences. And we end up sterilizing our own identities a bit and only focusing on the other, thereby forgetting to bring our own authentic identities to the table. And at times in my life, I've been so focused on the other and making sure that they're happy and comfortable and accepted that I haven't taken the time to think about what my own true identity even is. And that's not healthy. That's codependency. It's something we don't talk about a whole lot, but there's a very fine line between being inclusive and being codependent. But it's something we need to be aware of and learn how to navigate. Because there is a big difference between me loving you because I love you and you are a human and humans are beautiful and I see you in your beautiful humanity. There's a difference between that and me saying that I love you because I don't want to offend you. Because ultimately, at the core, I need you to love me so I feel lovable. Do you see that line? And if there is something that our world needs more of, that's not it. If there's something our world really needs more of, it's strong, loving, compassionate individuals who are rooted and grounded in the deepest and most authentic versions of themselves. And you know the people I'm talking about. These are the wise ones. They're the elders. They're the shamans of our modern society. And they are rare. These are people who can talk about their opinions in an open and inviting way that doesn't require the participation or the agreement on the listener's part. When these people talk, they are deeply engaged with their own human experience, and they are inviting you into it. And if we start parsing words that are spoken from deep experience, the meaning and the energy and the intention behind them gets lost. A few months ago, I had an experience with somebody that embodies this energy that I'm going to call inclusion that transcends language. So I'm a part of this men's group here in Denver, Colorado, and it's a non-religious group, but it holds the energy of a very sacred place. And it's just a group of men that meets to work on their shadow selves and trying to process and overcome things that would hold them back. So this is the setting where my experience with inclusion that transcended language took place. In the particular group meeting where this took place, I was working on one of my biggest hangups in life, and that's not feeling truly seen by others, not feeling noticed, not feeling acknowledged, not feeling special. So one of the men in the group was walking with me through this process as I descended into my core beliefs about self and about the world around me. And one thing I should say before I go further is I grew up in the church, but these days I find naturalistic language much more comforting in relation to spirituality. So at one point in this setting, I was invited to talk to myself for a minute as if I were an outsider observing my current state. And what I said to myself was, Daniel, I know that you feel like no one truly sees you, but don't you know that the universe sees you? I mean, really sees you. At the end of this session of processing and introspective exploration, some of the men in the group offered me blessings. That to say, they offered me encouragements and told me of the good that they see in me. One man said to me, Daniel, you're a son of God. God sees you. Now, this man's a practicing Christian, and he used language towards me that, honestly, I'm not comfortable with. Like I said earlier, I grew up in church, and the religious language from my church experiences carries a lot of baggage for me. So that's why I've turned to the naturalistic language. But he used language that I'm honestly not comfortable with. But it was offered to me in such a way that his comments weren't offered to affect my religious or theological beliefs. It simply carried a message for me that I am good and that I am seen. And he trusted himself to deliver an existential message to me, and he trusted the language that he knows and uses and is comfortable with to do it. So do you see where I'm going here? It wasn't the words that he used, but the energy with which he said them. Yeah. What I received wasn't the textual message in his words, but the contextual message that was being driven by his core beliefs about me and about the world. If you had seen a transcript of this conversation written down, if I had seen a transcript of this conversation written down, I probably would have thought it was a terrible conversation. I probably would have said, this dude's pushing his religious beliefs on this other guy, and that's not cool. But no, it wasn't. He was just using the context that he knows to convey a very important message to me. And it was a beautiful moment. So just let that sink in for a minute. Like I said earlier, authentic communication is so nuanced. It looks so different for everyone. We often edit our words as to not offend anyone. But if deep down our core beliefs are ones of otherness and division, those are going to come through no matter what word choice we use. And the same is true if our core values are of love, compassion, and unity. That's what's going to come through if that's what we believe deep down, no matter what the words are. If we're trusting in that and allowing ourselves to speak from that place, that's what's going to be transmitted. And it is so painfully obvious when someone's wishing of a Merry Christmas carries the weight of them needing to fight for their own religious beliefs by telling you that your story is wrong and somehow trying to assuage their own insecurities. And nobody likes that energy. Nobody likes that guy. Nobody wants that guy to wish him a Merry Christmas. So this Christmas season, I'm going to trust myself more. I'm going to say Merry Christmas because that's where my joy is present the most this season. And using those particular words. And that's a joy I want to share with the world. My happiness around Christmas time, especially this Christmas. Having a little 2-year-old at home, just like running around, watching Christmas movies and watching her shove handfuls of popcorn into her mouth while watching Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. It's great. It's a joyful season this year. I want to share that joy. So I'm going to share that joy and use the language that makes sense to me and allows me to do that the most readily. And I'm going to wish people a Merry Christmas. And you know what? Maybe I'll encounter somebody that says, I don't celebrate Christmas. Or maybe I'll be able to see that I've offended somebody just by judging by their body language and how they receive my greeting. And if that happens, I'm honestly looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to exploring that territory and inquiring about their traditions and asking in a compassionate way why my greeting made them uncomfortable. And in doing so, offering their story a place of honor in my Christmas story. And if someone offers me a happy holidays, I'll respond in kind. I won't insist rather that they have a Merry Christmas. My Merry Christmas will be an invitation into my joy rather than an assertion of how I think the season should be celebrated. So everything I've said in the past 15, 20 minutes, I think can be summed up with one brief quote from Maya Angelou. She said that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And you know what? I want people to feel my joy. I want people to feel my happiness. So I'm going to try that out this year. I might fumble through it a little bit, but I want to be more authentic and more vulnerable with people this Christmas season. So with that, I wish you a Merry Christmas, and I hope you have a wonderful close to 2018. I will see you in 2019. I have a lot of stuff planned, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. And just remember, as a backup, if all your other holiday greetings fail, you can always use Happy you know what? You have a good day. I'll see you later.